Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We're going to be drafting another Best Ball Mania 4 team on this show today. I am joined by Chuck Silver. Chuck, welcome back to the show. I feel like it's been a few streams since we've had you on. It's been Brian and I a couple of times in a row. How are you doing this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are?
Oh, I'm doing great. Last couple of weeks, just getting my August prepared. I'm traveling most of August, but it is prime best ball season, so I'm ready for it. Hoping to draft as many teams as possible over the next few weeks. So,
Chuck, this afternoon, where I have actually pulled up some of my favorite stats that Underdog has available for pick'em slip entries on tonight's preseason slate. We've got two games, Patriots and the Texans at 7 p.m. Eastern, Vikings Seahawks at 10 p.m. Eastern. I am sure, as an NFL aficionado like myself, you are interested in these games tonight. Have you thought at all about how you're allocating some of your bankroll dollars for some of this preseason stuff that's out there? And specific to Underdog, do you have any leans tonight you want to share with the people?
I don't have any leans yet. I haven't dove deep into tonight's games too much yet. I plan to do that right after we get off stream. Today is just pure fantasy football day. And I don't like in terms of bankroll, I'm mostly going to enter the smaller buy-ins. And in my head, I figure $100 a slate for now. But we'll see how we do tonight.
Yeah, no, I think we're on the same page. I love talking about this stuff, putting the content out for you all, but very much kind of a much more recreational environment. We're just having fun. We're wetting the beak. Football is back. Some of these plays are pretty gross overall. We know that. You know that. But we're doing the research to come up with the best ones that we can find. There is a preview video for the daily fantasy slates on DraftKings and FanDuel that I actually posted a couple hours ago to this channel. So go ahead and check that out after the live show if you're interested in the breakdown of why these guys are our top plays. But there are other ways you can play preseason fantasy football, and Underdog is giving you one of the best ways with these higher or lower stats that they're providing for multiple players on multiple games. We get our first taste of the action tonight. The 5 plays that you see on the screen here are our 5 top plays on the DFS slate. We can actually pretty much forecast exactly how ownership is going to go in daily fantasy based off of where the yardage lines are for these players at different positions too, Chuck. So I actually think it's a really good way to start at least looking at some of these lines when you're getting ready to participate in some preseason action. That's enough of that, though. Let's do what the people are here for. Really quickly, I guess, before I jump into a draft, a new 15 max $4 contest just dropped. The Chihuahua number 2 payout structure that gives $25,000 to first place in the playoffs. I think this looks pretty similar to the first edition of this contest that came out, but you can correct me if I am wrong, Chuck.
Yeah, I was hoping Underdog would drop a lower buy-in. I was hoping for a big $5 puppy, maybe 150 max, but we're not going to complain about good $4 contests with pretty good payout structures.
So waiting on 3 people. So if you are watching along with us today and you want to draft alongside us, there's still a couple of spots open here. So you can click on that in the best ball lobby here on Underdog and get in here. Chuck, I am really, really interested in how the draft board is starting to move based off of training camp information, based off of game reps. We've got 1 NFL game under our belt here in 2023. We're about to have 2 more tonight and plenty more throughout the rest of the weekend. I asked Brian on the last live stream how he was incorporating the information he's learning from these games into his, best ball strategy. I will throw that to you as well. What are you looking to learn over the next week or 2, and how is that going to alter your rankings and your process a little bit here?
Well, the first thing that I think about with with preseason, just stuff happening in preseason that changes the ADPs. I'm interested in the players that are going to drop, maybe because of poor performance, or maybe we get a bad word out of camp or something. I'm thinking Jamar Chase from 2 seasons ago when he dropped like 5 passes in preseason and his ADP tanked a whole round. In terms of like guys who are coming up on my radar now who I wasn't necessarily drafting before, like there's a lot of guys towards the end of drafts. So I'm actually interested to see who your late round targets are kind of shaping up to be this week.
I think a lot of these fringe, like 3rd and 4th wide receivers on teams, we're starting to get some clarity on who those guys are going to be. Good example might be what we may learn tonight with the New England Patriots, for example. We've drafted at least a little bit Tyquan Thornton as an option over the last few months when we've done these shows together, Chuck. But it seems like Thornton, for example, is actually falling in the rankings of the Patriots depth chart. So it'll be interesting to see how those snaps and opportunities shake out tonight. And the thing to watch there is almost somewhat backwards in your head. If we see Thornton playing a ton tonight, that's actually bad, right? Like we don't want him to be playing a lot because that means he truly is below some of the guys who are not playing. So that's just an example of the things that I'm looking for. And obviously Patriots on the brain a little bit just because that's what I've been looking at so far this morning and afternoon. We have the 8th overall pick here in the first round. We'll see how things shape out here in the next few picks, but might have an opportunity to be very on brand with the show's cover boy if things go a certain way. So that's, I think, my ultimate plan for the moment.
The thing that I'm noticing the most is because I've been harping about we want these early running backs because I think they're a value. And then we have guys, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, and Breece Hall. And it kind of just depends on the draft room. I've seen Breece go as late as like pick 48. And then I've still seen him get drafted around 30 right now with, whatever the fear is around him, I guess. And I'm just scooping him up. I hadn't been really drafting Jonathan Taylor and Breece Hall, but now feels like this is probably the lowest in ADP they'll be all draft season. So I'm going to try to get my exposure to those guys right now.
This spot here for Cooper Kupp, who just went 6th overall, Chuck, this doesn't feel like a major drop, right? I mean, he's still top 6 draft pick on the board. Very, very good. But there was a stretch where we were seeing people select him 3rd, 4th, fairly regularly. It does seem like the news about his hamstring issue is affecting people a little bit here. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I've seen this a few times before. That's kind of interesting. I am going to go with Bijan Robinson on this team.
Love it.
And I'm hoping I'll get a decent wide receiver back to me at 17. I'm pretty sure we'll have our pick of a couple of different guys we'll be happy with.
Yeah, Amon-Ra is a guy that I've seen jump into the first round pretty frequently, and I'm even taking him with the 11-12 pick a lot now. Kind of just I'm indifferent on the other receivers, whoever I get on the way back, whether it's Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, whoever. And so it's interesting, though, Amon-Ra in half PPR. Like, this guy catches footballs, right? You'd think he would go higher on the other sites that are full PPR, and so that's something to keep in mind, I think.
It doesn't seem like there's really anybody, from what we've read so far anyway, emerging as like a true secondary option in the passing game that should command that 25 to 30% of targets in Detroit. So Amon-Ra safely locked in. And I think people are finally starting to realize the volume there is very, very strong. And he probably is worthy of being a first-round pick and not a fringe like turn or straight up second-round pick. Very interesting back half of the first round here. Some of the wide receivers kind of slipping a little bit. I can't say I have often seen CeeDee Lamb fall completely out of round 1, but I mean, if I was a little further down the kind of randomizer lottery here on Draft Slot, I'd be more than happy to take CD at like 13 or 14 in the second round. It seems like someone's getting a really good value there. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there hasn't been that much news out of Dallas camp. Maybe it's just people haven't been hearing about him, but nothing's changed about his situation. He's still in a really good situation, so just kind of getting forgotten about. I kind of feel that way with A.J. Brown, too, though. A.J. Brown is kind of getting, I don't want to say disrespected, but kind of ignored compared to these other guys at the end of round 1 here.
A decent fall for him as well to go at number 12. I love the Tony Pollard pick here in the second round. He's kind of emerged as my favorite pick to take in the second round, especially if I get that wide receiver early. All right. Nick Chubb kind of falling a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Maybe he'll go right here. So yeah, I don't think I'm struggling with going double running back in the first 2 rounds. I still think getting at least one wide receiver here is the right way to go. And I've done this a couple of times, I think on shows with you, because I don't have a ton of shares of him. When Devontae Adams falls, I'm just going to take him. I don't really have him ranked as highly as I have in years past, but I think 17 is too far. I think he is ranked appropriately at that 1-2 turn. Doesn't seem like that's a big drop, but it's enough of a drop where I feel like this Bijan, Adams, and whoever I select in the 3rd round, that combo, I feel like it's starting to be a little more unique. So I like that.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I was trying to do recently is draft 2 early running backs in my first 3 rounds. And it's kind of weird, I'll usually stop at 4 running backs. If I do that, I'll grab 2 other guys before pick 120, I guess. Then just load up on the end of draft receivers. And the only time it really looks good is if I don't take an elite quarterback or elite tight end. Like, say I have 4 running backs and 6 receivers in my first 10 picks, my teams usually look okay. But I mean, that's that hyper fragile build. If the running backs get hurt, then I'm just kind of screwed.
I'm really used to seeing this, like, I guess the terminology we're using in this industry now is the avalanche, right? I'm used to
Mhm.
seeing this wide receiver avalanche here in the second round. We didn't really get that here. So I think there's better players available
Mhm.
at this 2-3 turn for these players down here than you normally see in these contests. I don't know if this is a result of what we've been expecting all along, Chuck, which is we've expected to see the running back start to get selected a little higher on average. Obviously, we got Henry going much higher than we were getting Henry at like the third round turn here pretty frequently a few weeks ago. Now we got all these guys going in the low teens. That just has not been the trend pre-August anyway, but it seems to be more common now that I guess more people are entering these contests, right?
Yep, and I love it. I was loading up on like I said, I've been loading up on the running backs, and now I can start to get some of the receivers that I've been passing over. Seeing Jalen Waddle go at 22, he's usually the guy I don't see fall. So seeing him at 22 is interesting. I've seen Devontae and T Higgins is the guy that I've seen fall to 30 most often.
I mean, I'm only going to speak to my thought process. I'm sure there was something else going on here. Just because of how hard it is to get now, I think if you own Tyreek and you have the opportunity to pair him with Waddle,
Hmm.
I kind of feel like I have to do that when that falls to me because it's just super hard to get them together where they're both being drafted. Tyreek around pick 4, Waddle around 17, 18, right? I think when you get it, the perfect pairing falling to you, you should probably take that. You should probably try to pair it with Tua because I don't think a lot of people are going to have that combo. It's very hard where the ADPs line up to actually get there. So I guess I'm just pontificating here, not really a question there for you, but that's at least what I would have done, I think, if I had Tyreek and Waddle was still there for me at pick 21. Olave, one of my highest exposed wide receivers this year, though. I love that pick as well.
Well, so Tyreek and Waddle, I probably would have done there just because I probably have like one combo of them. But Chase and T Higgins is a combo that I think I'm avoiding now. I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. It's a little different with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. Just those two completely dominate the target share over there. Where T Higgins still has to, well, we don't know if he'll be competing with Joe Mixon or not. I don't know if that was new news or not, but I read some new things that I didn't know that seemed kind of insane. So I'm probably not drafting Joe Mixon just in case.
Yes, there's a little bit of a legal situation there. I did see what you're referring to. It's a civil suit. It seems like it's hearsay, so I don't want to introduce that on the air here, but it's available on the Twitter machine for those of you who are curious. I think we should be more interested in some of the backup running backs there once again, right? It feels
Mhm.
like there could be a chance for them to have a pretty decent opportunity to play. There's an auto pick that I know you have in this range. I have a decent amount of exposure to him. Oh my goodness. I love the running backs that are falling here, but I think I'm going to take Amari Cooper here at pick
Love it.
32
Love it.
because I want to be pretty wide receiver heavy. I've already got my, I'll say hero RB. There's some controversy on what the strategy should be called, but I think that's what I'm angling for here now that I have Bijan on my team, Chuck. I've placed the wager that Bijan is going to be the best running back to own early in a draft, so I might as well lean into that and own that and build out my pass catchers now. That's my philosophy here.
No, I love it. Now you talked about the wide receiver avalanche. We saw it come a little bit more towards the end of that second round, but you know, that middle right there. You don't usually see Mark Andrews and Derrick Henry go that early. Jonathan Taylor still went at 31.
I had started the top of the last stream we did, I think it was last Saturday, going through some of my exposures with Brian and talking about how here's a range where I've identified I've got a player I have like 20% of, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a couple of wide receivers that get drafted around him I have like 4% or less of. When
Mm-hmm.
you're evaluating your portfolio, are you doing stuff like that as well? I think the example I gave was Gabe Davis, who I have a lot of, versus Addison from the Vikings and like Jahan Dotson from the Commanders. The three of those guys all get drafted pretty tightly together. And I tend to, regardless of what I'm trying to stack or not, it looks like my lean is to just take the same player over and over there, which is Gabe Davis. do think I need to force myself to diversify a little bit more, but I don't know if you feel differently about that. I'd be curious what your thoughts are.
I think it kind of depends on the player and what the other players are around them. So one thing I will say that when I was trying to diversify, like I guess a couple of weeks ago was the last time I did fast drafts on Underdog, but kind of like, all right, so there's 3 guys in these 3 rounds that we're not really getting to. And so I want to draft them all here, but it's like, I still want combos of those guys with my guys. You know what I mean? I don't want this just to be a contrarian lineup with
Right.
3 guys I hardly take. I still want to mix them in. So I think that's the hardest part for me is just the combos.
And I think we still don't really. Yeah, this is the chalkiest thing to say in best ball content. We don't have enough data to have firm conclusions. No, we really don't have enough data to know what like exposure level is enough. But I do think that I got some players around 30% in my portfolio. I feel like that's as high as roughly I want it to be. That's almost 4 times leverage on the field with players. I think that's probably enough.
Well, I wish I had a guy that I want on 30% of my teams, but I don't know that I don't know that there is one for me this season. Last year I had a few. This season my highest guy is still Juju at 25%. He's coming down though. I haven't been drafting him that much.
What do I want to do here? I think I've done this a couple times. I'm flag planting to some degree Drake London over Kyle Pitts as the pass catcher that I want exposure to here, Chuck. Maybe that's just being a little biased based off of 2 disappointing seasons from Kyle Pitts thus far, but especially early on last year, we saw Drake London play really, really well. High target share player. We're expecting it to be a low pass volume offense. This is a player that's very similar, I think, in my projections to like a DJ Moore, but the major difference for me, Chuck, is that I don't have to pay a premium cost to try to stack him with his quarterback. Desmond Ridder significantly cheaper than Justin Fields, probably for good reason, but it's a lot easier to get this Atlanta combo in drafts, and that's why I think I like it a little bit more.
Yeah, Drake London is one of those guys who I think I have taken him on a stream, but I'm not really like I prefer most of the guys around him. So he's a guy that I would like to try to mix in.
All right, and this is just your typical. I kind of like the reframing of this from Pat Caron. This is the dead zone, this 3rd to 6th round area, but really this whole draft board, like especially at the top, is your dead zone. There are landmines at the running back position, especially. We don't know who they're going to be yet. Someone here is going to get hurt. It's going to ruin our team, and this is just going to be a dead team in our portfolio, which is kind of why I think I keep circling back to make your selection of like 1, maybe 2 guys in the first 5 or 6 rounds at that position, and then just pray that those are the optimal selections on that team. That is the luck element of what we're playing here. Running backs, very, very volatile compared to wide receivers. There seems to be less, like Cooper Kupp, the year that he just completely destroyed. The Rams won the Super Bowl and he was a 5th-round draft pick. Yes, he was a league-winning wide receiver. But those types of draft picks are few and far between. It's the running backs that end up being the league winners, depending on where you get them, if they have those types of seasons, right? So you're not going to – you actually compound your chance of having a bust at running back if you go – obviously, we got a red badge here. He's done very well on Underdog, but Nolan's team here with the 4 running backs in a row, just the tangible example here, I think he's increased the probability that at least one of those players, we don't know who it is, on his team is probably not going to be worth one of those draft picks, and he probably should have mixed in a couple of wide receivers instead, right? That's at least the game theory side of some of the research that's starting to emerge. Shout out to the people who put out some of the stuff on the Best Ball Data Bowl that I believe Peter Overzet featured recently on his YouTube channel. That's some of the stuff a lot of those studies have started to highlight and talk about.
I've taken 3 running backs to start the draft a few times. It's not like something that I aim for. Just if the guys are there and I like them more than the receivers, I'll do that, and I'll just pound receiver after that. But I don't know that I'd take 4. Then your first 4-round picks just can never contribute to your lineup in the same week. And like you said, if you hit on 3 of 4, like it's not necessarily bad, but you're just so weak at wide receiver.
We're basically a very classic kind of concept in investing, whatever, opportunity cost, right? The opportunity cost of having these 4 players is probably higher than just the straight up value of having them on your roster. So we're going to be on the clock here in a second. I got a 0-1-3-1 build going. I'm pretty happy with how things have taken place here thus far. I don't necessarily have a specific lean in mind here, but I am happy to keep going with some pass catchers. What do you think, really quickly, Joe Burrow still being here? Is that something I should be thinking about? He'd be naked on my roster, or is that a bad idea?
If you did it, I would definitely take Tyler Boyd, and then obviously we're going to take a Kansas City guy. I don't think it's bad. I mean, it's a unique combo, and is Joe Burrow capable of having 2 rushing touchdowns in week 15, 16, or 17? Maybe.
Depending on what's going on at running back there, maybe, right? But I don't know. I think I'd rather continue building out my pass catcher upside. At this point, I'm still live to go any direction I want with a few different stacks with these high value assets. Jimmy Garoppolo, Deshaun Watson, Desmond Ridder, and Geno Smith all available in round 7 or later, right? So I like that. But I'm starting to get more on board, Chuck, with this idea of, yes, we obviously are interested in stacking some of these high value assets in our rosters, but it's probably smarter to stack some of the plays we get at the end of the draft, especially because I think that's where that correlation potentially could pay off more, where just by design, we're less certain what's going to happen with those plays. That's why they have lower ADPs. So again, going back to the core tenet of drafting, like you're correct, some of these late stacks like the Patriots or the Panthers, the Texans, like I think those are probably some of the things I want to draft more as well throughout the rest of the summer here.
Well, thinking about Chess Liam's win two BBMs ago, the key combo, you needed Jamar Chase. He put up a 50 in week 17, but the key combo was Amon-Ra and Rashad Penny in that Lions-Seattle game. And he said he was specifically targeting that game. And those guys, I think, were both round 15 or later in that draft. And so, if you can hit on that perfect combo, you might win $1 million.
We do like the idea of winning not just 1 million, 3 million. That's what we're playing for here this year in Best Ball Mania 4, Chuck. All right, how risky do I want to get here with discussing some of the things I'm thinking about? We've got it looks like some sharp players here with the number of badges in the contest. They're probably not watching this show. I don't think I have to worry too much about that. Who knows? But I will say, way back at the beginning of our time together, I talked about getting exposure to some of those dome games in week 17. It's going to be cold. It's going to be snowy. It's going to be bad weather around the country for most football teams playing. But there are a few that play in very, very friendly environments. Those dome stadiums, Colts and Raiders is one of those stadiums. And since I already have Devontae Adams on this team, I kind of like the idea here, Chuck, of giving myself a couple of different opportunities to get a quarterback from that game on this roster.
Yep, I like it. Seems like kind of a weird draft room. I like it.
Definitely, I don't have a good read on it. I don't know. I'm not really feeling like I have a good handle on what some of these guys are trying to do here. I can tell you that on the even rounds here, where the draft picks are going to the left, because I put the big board here up on the screen, one of the things I'm already thinking about is how I can probably let some quarterbacks go in those rounds, because a lot of these owners already have at least one. Some of them may end up with a second one. So if I'm specifically targeting these quarterbacks that go pick 100 or later, I should probably grab one of those in the odd round because they're probably more to get selected after I pick there. I don't know. Maybe I'm making a little too much of that just looking at the purple streaks here on the top of the screen next to each person's username. This is just kind of things we got to think about when we're making selections. There's ADP, and then there's, well, what do these owners near me need, and what are they thinking about? These are maybe some of the game theory things that I think you start thinking about when you're more comfortable with the ADPs and the player on the draft board. If you're new to drafting, that's stuff that I think you should start thinking about, but just focus on building your roster first and foremost. Obviously, we're just having a little bit more of a higher level discussion here because this is like our 40th show together, I think, since May. So we've talked about some of the tried and true concepts many times before. Anybody watching, we appreciate you. Of course, ask a question. We'll steer the conversation in that direction accordingly. 5 wide receivers here very early. I found myself basically doing this often, Chuck, and I almost put myself in a position where I think I'm kind of done with my wide receivers if I do it, quote unquote, correctly by about round like 12 or 13, because at the end of the drafts, I'm trying to take shots on the other positions. Is that a macro that you fall into, or do you really not have a preference there?
Well, so I talked about recently, I'm trying to take more running backs early, and there are actually a few late wide receivers that I'm interested in. There is like, to me, there's a wide receiver dead zone after like KJ Osborne and Alec Pierce for maybe 3 rounds. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a couple guys who were going undrafted, and maybe now they're getting drafted 17th, 18th round. Who I'm interested just based on training camp news now. It's pretty risky to take more than a couple of them on one team. Very high risk for probably just medium reward. But I'm kind of like, if I take these shots on a few different teams and I hit on one of them, then it's probably worth taking the shots.
All right. So where are we here? We've got a very, very strong core of wide receivers. There's still plenty of good wide receiver plays left. Dotson's someone that I think I want more exposure to, but I am starting to hone in on Javonte Williams when he's available to me. Not only expected to be available in week 1, which was a little bit of a surprise to people this summer, but expected to maybe get some run in preseason games. It seems like he's far ahead of schedule on his recovery from his knee injury. And here in the 7th round, if he hits the ceiling we think he's capable of hitting, this could be one of those league-winning running backs that you can draft.
Right. And when we talk about ceilings too, like if you look at Javante's game logs from last year, he only had a couple good games, but we're not expecting good games every game. If he has a couple 20 plus fantasy point games, like that's really what we're trying to do here is just grab spike weeks.
So 2 running backs, 5 receivers. There's a couple of guys slipping. Not a tremendous amount, admittedly. DeAndre Swift, I can tell you, is a player I have, I think, 0% of. Where are you netting out on these Eagles running backs? Do you think I'm making a mistake there? Do I need to get more Swift in my portfolio?
I think I'm about 10, 11% on Swift and then right around 8% on Rashad Penny. But most of that Swift has been in the last few weeks. I started adding him more. It's just I guess if he's a starting running back on a really good offense, and he's a good player. He was hurt. The Lions didn't use him correctly, whatever. I mean, this guy was like top 10 in my rankings last season, and now we can draft him at pick 80.
He's a first round draft pick last season. A very big fall off for him. I admittedly have identified that as one of the spots I probably want to course correct on. And as I say that, it's like the board is throwing him back at me, like saying, okay, prove it, buddy. We'll see what happens here with Nolan. He's got plenty of running backs already, so I don't think he's going to take one, but stranger things have happened. But I like the concept that you hit on here, which is independent of the player specific take, zooming out and thinking about, this is going to probably be a very good team this year. I probably want to be exposed to it. I've already sort of wagered here on this team against Philadelphia pass catchers being the players that I'm going to want in the fantasy playoffs. So given that, and the fact that he's fallen to me, and the fact that with this selection, I'm not necessarily going to be selecting a Brown stack with Elijah Moore or Deshaun Watson, I can take Swift, make him my 3rd running back, almost a full round behind ADP. And now I think I feel very good about the top end of that position on this roster.
Yeah, I definitely. So one thing I really want is 3 good running backs, where the 3rd is maybe a little bit lower than DeAndre Swift, but just having 3 good running backs feels pretty good, especially you already have 5 elite receivers. Now, are you drafting a lot of elite QB?
I've started to over the last month or so. I feel like it's probably wrong not to have at least in line with the field there with those guys. Where so for me, I'm drawing the line at quote unquote elite at like that Joe Burrow ADP. Those kind of 5 guys there, or whatever. Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson are the guys I feel like I want more of. Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert, I don't know how I feel about my exposures there. I kind of feel like there's a chance that just on that like median and ceiling fantasy point outcome, that even if we like those offenses, they still could be swallowed up by those other guys that get drafted in that section of the board. So I really don't know what to do there. I'm fine with being underweight there. I don't have 0, but I have pretty close to 0 of those guys.
I have 1 share of Trevor Lawrence now I'm up to like 430 total drafts. 1 share of Trevor Lawrence, and I think I have Justin Herbert on the other sides, but I still haven't taken him on here. And there's a couple times when I've been excited because I thought he was going to fall to me and I could pair him up because I'm drafting Mike Williams a bit more than I was before, but just don't have the opportunity to take Justin Herbert. I think I'm about 60% of my teams are elite QBs. So
Okay.
I guess I'm pretty into the elite QBs.
No, I think that's a really good macro rule there. I haven't necessarily been looking at cumulative ownership by kind of tier within positions, if you will, but quarterback, elite, I'll call them, I guess not elite tight end because there's Travis Kelce and there's everybody else, but I'll call them tight ends that are tied to elite quarterbacks or good passing offenses. That's where a lot of my tight end exposure is. So although, we both admit we're a little light on Herbert, I've actually started to draft a lot more Gerald Everett in like that middle to late portion, round 12, 13 section of the draft, because we're pretty confident that's going to be a pass-heavy offense, and I'm willing to stomach the price there of assets in Justin Herbert's offense. I really think that's the answer, by the way, to the test with Justin Herbert and the Chargers. We can get our Chargers exposure through some of the other players at the other positions, and we can probably find that 15 to 20 quarterback points elsewhere. That's kind of how I'm approaching it.
Right.
To me, and I am. So he's once again flipped Dak Prescott in ADP. Anthony Richardson of the Indianapolis Colts is going to be my QB1 on this roster. I've got Michael Pittman. I've got Devontae Adams. And if this is the league winning combo I need in week 17, when this team absolutely is there in the finals, I'm going to feel pretty good about that.
And I don't know, whatever you just said made me think of like the combo. So you have Anthony Richardson, Pittman, and then you have Devontae Adams for that great week 17 game with Bijan, Amari Cooper. So something I've been trying to do is get these combos like Michael Pittman and Anthony Richardson. I guess the main one I've been doing is Justin Fields and DJ Moore, but just trying to mix up who I have them with, who's my first round pick, Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and just trying to make sure if I can get two good stacks with, my Justin Fields, DJ Moore, whoever it is, and my first round pick, I feel pretty good about it.
This is, I don't recall off the top of my head the ADPs. I'm sorry for anybody watching, but Richardson to Pittman to me feels a lot like the first year that we knew Lamar Jackson was going to be the starting quarterback for the Ravens, and the ADP price was pretty reasonable for most of the summer with Andrews and Lamar Jackson. And Lamar went out there, wins an MVP. They were the odds-on favorite to go out there and win a Super Bowl. Obviously, that didn't work out. But in fantasy football, they were well worth having. Richardson and Pittman, that right there should be a ton of the rushing production and a ton of the passing production in the Colts offense. Regardless of how good the team is, it just feels like we have an opportunity for them to outperform this ADP. I love that stack. It's one of my favorite stacks to get in these contests.
Did you happen to see that stat, something about how many rookie quarterbacks have ever supported a top 24 wide receiver?
I can't say I saw that. Why don't you
I think it was
hit
one.
me with it?
I think it was one.
But let's make it two. Let's make it two, huh? That is plain and simple. All right. 1-3-5-0 at the tight end position. I don't actually feel the need to really lean into somebody just yet here. This is kind of a dry spot for wide receivers, but I do love Nico Collins. We're going to potentially see what that Houston Texans starting lineup looks like tonight a little bit. We're pretty confident that Nico Collins is going to be part of it, but even though this ADP is probably about 30, 40 spots higher than it was at the beginning of the draft season for us, Chuck, I still think Collins is a pretty strong asset to have on a roster.
That's one thing that we did talk about on the last stream where, I was getting Nico Collins at pick 140, 150. I'm having trouble clicking on his name now. And not just necessarily Nico Collins specifically, but other players. I think it's not that I don't like his price. I just don't, at pick 140, there's so much more potential to beat that ADP versus the 113 now, even if now he's appropriately priced versus before he was just too cheap. There's a couple guys like that. Like Sky Moore is the one that really jumped up, and I kind of get it, but that's a guy that definitely.
Yeah, I have a couple of pieces of him. I think I drafted him a couple times. I fell right into the groupthink phenomenon where the news came out. Tony's a little banged up, had something cleaned up in his knee, and it's like, well, got to draft Sky Moore now because that's why his ADP flew up the board, right? So I think I got at least 2 or 3 shares of him. But now that we've got some optimistic reporting that Tony's going to be back for week 1. Why hasn't the price corrected? That's kind of how I feel about it right now. I feel like congratulations, you got your buying opportunity on Kadarius Toney, a player we already know they want to force feed the football when he's able to take the field. Now you can get him. He's still available like almost a full round before where he's been drafted on average for basically the majority of the summer in this contest. Almost the reverse of that Nico Collins situation. His price is significantly better. So I almost want to draft Toney every single time I can when he's on the board behind ADP now. It's kind of what I'm trying to say.
I've been adding him a bit after not really drafting him at all for most of the draft season.
Another player in that category, Zach Charbonnet, back with the Seahawks. There was a little bit of a shoulder issue there. Not only is he back with the Seahawks and practicing, Kenneth Walker still isn't. So what's going on there? A little uncertain what's going to happen with Kenneth Walker. It's very hard to read the tea leaves with Pete Carroll and injuries at running back. But 10th round draft pick on average, Zach Charbonnet, a player admittedly I already have a decent bit of in my portfolio. I think this is team 57 for me so far. I'm pretty happy about my exposure with him at this point, given the uncertainty there already with Seattle.
Yeah, I'm about 2x the field on Zach Charbonnet. I'm very happy to keep adding more in this range. The big thing with me in this range is I don't love a lot of the receivers. I'm okay with Nico Collins. I don't want Allen Lazard. Darnell Mooney, I've started to add more just since I'm high on Justin Fields. It makes sense if I'm higher on Darnell Mooney, but tend to draft these running backs in this range usually.
I've fallen into the trap of the mid-range tight end a little bit. And I guess going back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago and being somewhat in love with the idea of tight ends tied to elite offenses, this would be a spot where I would take what was I trying to say here? Sorry, I just had a complete brain fart because I was queuing up my QB2. I would take Dalton Kincaid. I've done it a lot. He's obviously already gone off the board here. How are you feeling about that Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox duo at tight end? Their ADP, they're actually both rising a little bit right now.
So Dawson Knox is by far my highest owned tight end, and it doesn't feel great right now. And then I've been listening to a lot of Liam streams, and this dude is the biggest Dalton Kincaid advocate ever. And so now I find myself clicking on Dalton Kincaid a little bit more. The main thing with me is he's not expected to run the same routes as Dawson Knox, right? I feel like he's going to line up more like a receiver than anything, even if it's in the slot. And it's just, I don't know, it's a little bit different. I kind of feel that way with Gesicki versus Hunter Henry too. Like at first I was completely on Henry off of Gesicki, and then it flipped, and now I kind of just want to draft Henry more.
I want to have equal exposure to both, not comparable prices, but I will say just from and again, there are other places to get your top-notch X's and O's football analysis. I do think they're going to play slightly different roles in the offense. I think Kincaid's going to play more closer to like an actual slot wide receiver role for them, whereas Knox is probably going to be your more traditional inline tight end. So I don't think they're necessarily going to take a tremendous amount of snaps away from each other is what I am trying to say here with that. Okay. Kind of had a little bit of interest in Jacoby Myers being here. I am going to go with Dalton Schultz at tight end. I had a little bit of him early. I don't have as much of him as I thought I was going to have at the beginning of the spring and summer here, but kind of going for another week 17 game stack with or without the quarterback here. Got a couple Texans players. If I can find a Titan I want to slide in here at some point, I'd feel pretty good about having some exposure to that. Obviously with Bijan and Drake London, finding a Chicago Bear at some point would be something I am also interested in doing. I definitely am thinking more about those correlations in championship week. That's where all the prize money is this year in Best Ball Mania 4 specifically. It's like heavily weighted to that. So these are players that obviously I like in my rankings in general, but just specific to this contest, trying to optimize for pretending I'm right, that this team's going to make the finals, and I want to make sure that I have enough shots to actually climb the top of the leaderboard once I'm in that contest. I think that's the right way to draft here. I don't think that's an earth-shattering revelation. I think that's been discussed across the best ball universe, but just for sake of argument, that's what we're still doing here today. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, are you considering the regular season prizes at all, or just kind of like we're going to optimize for the playoffs, and if we hit the regular season, that's great?
The second thing, I think that's more
Yeah.
the latter for me, definitely.
Yeah, same.
I think we're starting to see more people look into what it's like to optimize for weekly winners, which admittedly I have not drafted a team for. Looking at what the ceiling lineups look like week to week, construction wise, number of total points wise, but I just think it's still pretty hard to go out and build a roster optimized for that. One of the things that I've thought about in weekly winners that maybe we could expand on if users are interested, viewers are interested, and want to see some more tools on the Occupy Fantasy website. We're talking about stacking for obviously weeks 15, 16, and 17, Best Ball Mania 4, some of the smaller tournaments. I think there's probably more value in being mindful of, like, I have Anthony Richardson and Michael Pittman here, right? And I've got the Texans a little bit on this team. I should probably be more interested in stacking up just division games, because right there you've got like 6 opportunities, I think, to hit some spike weeks. So I think that's what I would think about more with weekly winners. But admittedly, I haven't thought about it a tremendous amount.
Okay, I've only drafted like 5 weekly winners myself. I did the one on stream with Moose. The rest have been slow drafts. I think that's the way to do weekly winners. Fast drafts, there's too much you're trying to do in the 30 seconds you get to make your pick. But those are things that I've been thinking about when doing those contests.
And Godspeed to you, because I think at this point I'm over slow drafts, especially. I just feel like when the notification rolls in, I'm like, what team am I drafting again? Ugh.
Yeah.
Okay, pick 152. What do I want to do here? It's almost like things that I have mentioned in the past just like keep falling to me on this show. Gerald Everett, a tight end I've taken a lot because he's anchored to a really, really strong quarterback and an offense that we think is going to be pretty good this year. Not only am I happy to have him on my team, I'm happy to have these 2 tight ends and call it a day at that position on this roster.
One thing that you were talking about was kind of mixing it up between guys like, so you took Gerald Everett, and I'm kind of light on him, but I have a lot of like Tyler Higbee and even Dalton Schultz, and these guys are drafted right around the same place, and their range of outcomes probably really isn't that much different. And so that's that's something that I'm trying to do, especially when the correlation matches up.
I definitely, to that point, very, very early on, I'm sure you remember this, I kept talking about how Tyler Higbee was one of my favorite picks. So I'm doing a little bit of that as well. I'm trying to balance that out in this range as well. Kind of a weird spot to be in, admittedly, with 5 rounds left. I'm already in a position, Chuck, where I feel like I don't want to add to quarterback or tight end. Having Richardson, Geno Smith, Dalton Schultz, Gerald Everett, I think filling out the running back position especially is something I need to look at here, which leads me to the next selection. Who are you going to be? A couple of rookies here: Rashawn Johnson, Kendre Miller, Jerome Ford. I'm kind of out on with the news that he left practice and hasn't come back yet. I do have a lot of Kenny Gainwell. Speaking of balancing out exposures, I have a decent bit of Kendre Miller. We were drafting him fast and furiously early in the contest, Chuck. Dante Foreman has reportedly been getting those first team reps, splitting with Khalil Herbert, and I haven't had as much of him on my teams to this point. So I'm at a crossroads here where, do I go with what I think is going to be more optimal there, which is I think Rashawn Johnson is a great play in this backfield as the rookie they're bringing in. I feel like he has that home run hitting upside. They probably trust Khalil Herbert a lot. I definitely like those 2 guys better than Dante Foreman. But given how much we expect the Bears to run, there is probably a case for all 3 of these guys to be useful throughout the season. So we probably do want at least a little bit of them. And I guess before I let you take over on this, I'm speaking from the perspective of you and I are drafting a bunch of teams. We want to mix it up a little bit. Yeah. If you have a lean here, obviously go with that. But that's what's influencing my process. I already know I have a lot of those other 2 guys, so I want to get some more form in here.
Yeah, on that note you said about, do I go by what the consensus is or do I go by what I think? I would lean in towards going what you think. I mean, you're a sharp guy, and if you have a contrarian take, I think that's awesome. The more contrarian takes, the better.
I love being encouraged to follow my gut. That is a fun thing across the board in these types of contests that we can play. I can't get a good read on the Bryce Young ADP just in general. I've seen him go up here. I've seen him go in the last round. And I think that's why this range of the draft board ends up being really funky. And as these preseason games kick off, we're going to see it get even funkier. Someone's going to have a big game tonight, Chuck, whether it's my boy Tank Dell that I've talked about all spring or some other wide receiver or some other running back. You'll start to see that player get selected more heavily here in these last 4 rounds because of that over the next 24 hours. And then everybody will forget about him a little bit. And Friday night's players, they'll go up like into the board here a little bit. So I think over the next few days here, this will be an interesting time to be playing these contests if you're not playing preseason DFS or building pick'em slips specifically, because obviously you have other reasons to be invested and interested in these games. It's the information that they give you about these players at the end of the draft.
Well, kind of what we were talking about at the beginning, like some guys are definitely going to become draftable that weren't draftable before. But if someone drops an ADP because of poor performance when, it probably isn't going to affect the regular season, I'm very interested in scooping up just all the value.
I think round 14 seems to be an aggressive selection for Isaiah Likely. I'm just kind of looking at this board. You had mentioned this feels like a little bit of a strange draft room, and I am flat out not going to disagree with you. This has been kind of an all over the place draft by ADP. A few values that I've been happy with. Geno Smith was not necessarily my plan, but getting him a full round behind ADP, happy to do that, especially because I have JSN here. Got value on Swift, and a little bit of value on Gerald Everett, although not a tremendous amount, admittedly. Feeling pretty good about this one, Chuck.
I like it. I think Geno is the one quarterback that I think I don't have enough of. I'm at 8%, but if he's going to support 3 top 36 receivers, then he's probably going to do pretty well himself.
All right. Which direction do we want to go here? I know that my binky in this range is Gus Edwards. I don't want to go that route here. I want some more. Actually, you know what? I haven't taken Justin Ross once yet this summer. I don't love the cost, admittedly, but some of those training camp highlights are so smooth. I'm falling victim to that. And I just feel like a player that has a chance to be anchored to Patrick Mahomes and have a role, I'm willing to take a few shots there. A little bit of just a high-risk dart throw here with Justin Ross. I don't want to completely have no investment in him. I want a piece. So I'm buying into the hype. I'll admit it. I want Justin Ross a little bit.
I think we probably want exposure to Kansas City in most drafts we do. I saw an interesting stat. I'm sure you saw it too. How many teams had an over-under of 50 last season? Or how many games? Like which team had the most over-under 50 games?
It's got to be – okay, it has to be the Chiefs. But if you were going to make me guess, I was going to say probably either Buffalo or Philadelphia as well. The good teams, basically.
Yeah, I think it was something like the Chiefs had 11 games with an over-under of 50, and the next closest was 4.
Jesus Christ.
So it's like who's going to score the touchdowns besides Kelsey? If Pacheco comes out good, okay, but someone else has to catch the football, and I doubt it's going to be MVS.
Your MVS has been near and dear to my heart for a couple of years now, both with the Packers and the Chiefs, but they've brought in some competition for him. So it's definitely not the worst thing in the world to be a little skeptical there. I have not seen A.T. Perry with the Saints get drafted much. That was kind of a surprising thing to see hit the board here. Okay. I feel pretty good about the running backs I do think I'm going to add at least a couple more. And I feel very, very good about the news that Ty Chandler, this ties into some of the preseason content we have available on Occupy Fantasy. The daily plug for tonight's action, the 2-game slate in Daily Fantasy, will be posted by about 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. One of the news items we uncovered, Chuck, this week during the research was the Vikings see the backup running back job as a straight-up competition between Ty Chandler and Kene Nwangwu. Nwangwu, probably a slight edge just because he's got the special teams role. But that piece of information right there, Chuck, has told me, okay, Chandler definitely ahead of McBride right now. So that makes me feel a little bit better about taking Chandler at the end of these drafts, betting on him potentially playing his way into a bigger role as the season marches on here.
Which one is the guy that led the NCAA in rushing? That was McBride, right?
That's McBride. And I said it again in our show, in my video that I put out earlier today. I'm going to issue a correction. Dwayne McBride was second in the NCAA in rushing last year. He was second by 15 yards. So I apologize. I pride myself on being correct. Not even number one. He was number two.
Is he even good at football, man? Like, what are we doing
here? Can't leap ahead of Ty Chandler, so who knows? But no, in a more serious note, end of the draft, I've consistently referred to these running backs that are available down here as lottery tickets. I'm fine with buying these lottery tickets because if any one of them hits value, I'm in a much stronger position to succeed than my opponents.
Yeah, like most of these are going to miss. We only have to hit on a couple. Like I've talked about, I'm taking earlier running backs, so I'm not getting to these end of draft guys as much. But I guess we'll see how the draft season plays out. Someone's going to sign. Like, it's so funny to see that Kareem Hunt was on the verge of signing, and he's the guy who I have not been touching, versus Ezekiel Elliott and Leonard Fournette. But then I guess he didn't sign, so we'll see what happens to him.
None of them have signed. It's a little surprising. And the thing is, the Colts, who also worked out Hunt, some news came across the wire. They signed a running back. I think whatever these Zoom calls have been resulting in for these players hasn't been much, Chuck, because it's doing a little bit more for the running backs that are out there that are willing to just take the contract that's being offered, right? And I think, look, I feel for these guys, but it just does not seem like they're going to get what they want in the near term here. It's going to take some creative, I think, negotiations when the collective bargaining agreement comes back up, maybe some changes to when rookie running back contracts can, toll and hit free agency for them to maybe earn a little bit more for their contributions to their football teams. And honestly, I wish them the best of luck in that pursuit, but in the near term, it doesn't seem like anything's going to change.
No, I mean, the Super Bowl winning running back, I think, like, in the last 10 years, maybe one of them was paid, if even one. Like, they were all just, not to disrespect, but they were just guys.
But it speaks to the salary cap dollars being allocated by the franchise, right? And I think that's ultimately where this phenomenon has come down to. There's a lot of sharp people. This is a very, very, very popular industry. Football makes a lot of money for a lot of people. So they're looking at this stuff pretty diligently, and they've kind of identified that it's production they don't necessarily have to overpay for. So that's also a concept that makes sense in fantasy football at the end of the draft in contests like this. The running back especially, if a guy goes down that is going to touch the football 20 to 30 times a game, there's going to be another player that comes in and gets at least half of that opportunity. You don't see that at wide receiver. If A.J. Brown gets hurt, his 10 to 12 targets disappear from the Eagles' offensive game plan, sure, but it's not like all 12 of those go directly to Devontae Smith or Quez Watkins. They get redistributed somewhat equally. Running back's very different. And I'm about to time out here. So Jeff Wilson, I don't have as much of him as Raheem Mostert, but given that we expect Miami to be a high-powered offense, when we miss on the high-end wide receivers, I'm happy to get exposure to these running backs in Mike McDaniel's scheme late. And 25 picks behind ADP, look, I get it. It's a cliche, crowded backfield with Wilson, Mostert, and a chain there, but I'll take this all day long as a value here.
I think Jeff Wilson's my most exposed from that group, then a chain, and then Raheem Mostert. It's the guy that I have the least of over there.
All right. What do we want to do here? And I got my Chicago bring back with the Atlanta Falcons that I have on this team with Foreman. I wanted to hit on that as well. I could add another pass catcher with Anthony Richardson, although Josh Downs is off the board, and I don't necessarily want another tight ends, already having two that I invested pretty heavily in. Richardson's the kind of quarterback where I'm okay with only having one teammate with him in my stacks. I do like the double stacks, but Richardson, I'm kind of thinking of him as kind of like 1.5 players himself, given the expected rushing production. So I think that's fine.
No, I like it.
Trying to see what is still here at wide receiver. Am I just going to go for the bit here? We have preseason content coming out, already out, video on the channel. I don't really have any of this player. I don't have a tremendous reason to select him other than I just want an 8th wide receiver. Demario Douglas from the Patriots. Can I really do that here? I think I'm going to. I want a piece. It's the 18th round. If I get any production out of this player, I will take it. Most of our 18th round picks are not going to contribute to our rosters.
Mhm.
Demario Douglas, come on down. Are you going to be active on game day most weeks? I hope you will be. I'm going to buy into the hype here a little bit.
I mean, let's say you get to week 17, the finals, and you're the only player in the finals with Demario Douglas. Probably feels pretty great.
Especially if he's starting late in the season
Mhm.
with Mac Jones or, God forbid, Bailey Zappi if the Patriots are trying to get a look at some of their backup players for 2024, which seems like something that's possible. This is not like complete smoke here on Demario Douglas. We're not just picking these players completely out of our ass here. Douglas repeatedly, like every single day, dude, with these Patriots practice reports, blowing away his competition, winning his one-on-ones, by far the most impressive wide receiver in camp. Not an undrafted free agent, but I will tell you that this feels a lot like Jacoby Myers when he first joined the Patriots, and all the beat writers were saying, watch out for this guy. He's legit. He's really like going to be a part of this team. Trust your beat writers, guys. They're very, very good. They're literally doing their jobs. They're covering these teams. They're trying to tell you who the best players are going to be. We trust them. That's why we rely on them extensively when we're doing preseason research, even in-season research on upcoming plays. So, Chuck, I'm happy to do a draft with you every single time I get to do one. I think we got a pretty good team here together. I look forward to actually drafting once again with you tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. Same place here, the Occupy Fantasy YouTube channel. And you're going to be the one in the driver's seat here while I marvel at the masterpiece you put together. So
love it.
Before I let everybody out of here, do you have anything you want to share?
No, just, Chihuahua's out $4, 15 max. Go max it out today. And watch preseason football. Chris had a pretty good video up on this channel, so make sure you watch it if you're interested in the game tonight. Or if you're not interested, maybe watch it and it'll get you interested. So
there we go. I appreciate the endorsement for sure. New to Underdog Fantasy, 100% deposit match on your first deposit up to $100, and start playing with $200 today. Promo code is in the bottom bar of this video that you're watching right now. Thank you for joining the show and watching the stream today. We will talk to you guys again tomorrow.